a fairly recent addition and easily one of the best spawns introduced recently. This is how to hunt Rootthings. This spawn is located in Podzilla and is accessed through the Podzilla quest, but doing the entire quest is not necessary. Just doing the first mission of the Dangerous Journey will unlock access to the spawns. Anything past that will be to unlock access to Root Kraken, but this boss is ignored by most due to its difficulty and lackluster drops. Besides that, Podzilla itself has 4 underground floors. The first 2 where the Rootthings are, and the next 2 have the new Quaras. Due to the creature's innate abilities, Rootthings are meant for team hunting, and Quaras are meant for solos or duos, since the amount of players affect their chain damage in both directions, and in the case of Rootthings, the less players the chain attack from the bug trackers hit, the lower damage it will do, going from around the 2k damage if hit solo, down to around 400 damage when the chain bounces off others. The change damage type is of physical, and defensively you want to go with physical and earth protection. There is also a bit of holy, but it's not worth building for it. Offensively, they are weak to fire damage, so fire weapons and GFBs are preferred, followed by death if necessary. Additionally, for wheels, anything with AoE focus works the best, so the typical Xorimask for EKs and Grenade for paladins. But as paladin, I have tried out the positional tactics, and it works well if you need to rely on your own healing more. Druids tend to go with tier 2 upgrades on mass res, and some points for twin bursts, but also decide sometimes based off greater gems available. In the case of Sorcerer, mine prefers to go with buffs on the waves the most, but that requires some levels. Additionally, another underrated build is to go with the Death Beam. It does decent damage against creatures, but its primary use is to lower off cooldowns of your spells, especially the UE. Very good strat if you don't have a tier helmet or a low tier 1, since having the UE for every pull is what will do the most impact as a sorcerer. Also, unless you're going for greater gems, both mages should get some lesser HP gems. This seems to be also pretty good for mages, as there can be some high combos, and the best way to combat that is with higher HP. This also works very well for paladins, so highly recommended. Moving up to charms, I'm a big fan of parry in general for ranged creatures, so I recommend for EKs to use it on bug trackers, but besides that, elemental charms are best like this. And as for how long it will take to unlock the bestiary, in average it will take 3 hours for nutshells, 5 for the bug trackers, and over 8 for the embers. And before I break down the labs, this time I will be mainly covering 2 of them, for 800s and 1Ks. This spawn is very recent, and it was already over 900 when it got added, so I have no personal experience hunting it at lower levels, but it's definitely possible, although I would recommend to do that on the first floor. This video however focuses on -2, which is the better one. Also, the lab I'm showing off right now could work out for lower levels, but by doing the pulls together. If you see the way we were hunting, it was mostly EK and MS starting off the pulls, and EDRP always on the back luring the previous one, constantly on the move as nearly 2 duos hunting. This was pretty effective the first couple days of the spawn, when it had slightly more density of creatures. But leaving that aside, let's do some general tips. As the EK, I will start off the pulls with 1 amp res, and then start spamming it after my initial pull starts to die off. That way more of them remain attacking me, and also it's easier to set up the second box with mostly bug trackers this way. Also it's very necessary to be using Supremes when the pulls start, as both mages are usually at higher risk and might not be able to heal you as much. Same goes with the paladin, so if the druid is not comfortable or good enough with the mass res, both will suffer more. Sorcerers also should try to hold positions for longer. Since they do the most damage here, the more waves they can hit, the better. This is very dependent on your level to how many creatures you can hold, but keep it in mind. Also, druids can be more GFP focused as both twin bursts and UEs have long cooldowns, and it's not recommended to go in for a wave, especially with high density pulls. For paladins, a lot of their lures are quite apart from the actual pulls, so for most of them, they need to go ahead of the team first in order to make it back on time, but by doing this they will be at much higher risk due to taking full damage from the chains on their own. If anyone feels too low level to deal with the chains, they should look to do lures on pairs. Lastly, there is a rumor/theory that doing the task of Mission 3 of the questline reduces the damage done by creatures for 2 hours. This seems to be true, but to a very low impact, to the point that I don't even notice a difference and don't do it myself, but perhaps lower level teams might want to test it out further. And with that said, let's start with the first lab, recommended for over level 800s. The first pull is south of the entrance. For the first time in the lab, you can go slowly and do the pull with the creatures on the way, but on the actual lab, you will be coming from the northwest. For this one, EK and Paladin go ahead, RP goes northeast to lure creatures, and EK peeks south to grab a few. Then the MS and ED come together luring the creatures on the way. Ideally, the first pull on the EK should be close to dying by the time the RP enters the screen. since this spot in particular doesn't have much space to run around safely. Next pull is on the big room to the southwest. EK set up around the middle and both mages get there quick. Meanwhile, the RP can lure the creatures left behind from the previous pull, or in some cases take a peek to the east to lure a few. It will depend on how many creatures your team can handle. Moving on goes southwest, EK and MS go ahead first and start the pull. ED and RP follow behind slowly, luring the creatures on the way. To do it this way, the MS is needed to UH the EK quite a bit, so keep that in mind, and if necessary, swap the MS and ED. For the next pull, go east and ignore the creatures on the way, and just like before, the MS follows closely behind and starts the pull as a duo. Then comes the ED and RP luring the creatures left behind. For this one at least, it's highly recommended to have a duo to do the lure. Since that room has plenty of block trackers, it can do a lot of damage to solos. Then after that, go northeast. EK and MS ignore the first room and set up on the next one, leaving those creatures behind to be lured by the ED and RP. Then keep moving towards the northwest. This time, EK and mages go together, leaving the RP to do the lure of creatures from behind. And then after this pull, follow the path northwest. EK gets a bit closer to the left by the wall and come back to grab a few from there. Meanwhile, the RP brings the ones left in the back. Then after that, go southwest and set up to the left of the stairs, once again splitting up as duos, with EK and someone starting the pull, and RP with the other luring from behind. And with that, you're back to the first pull, hence finishing the lap. Something like that, the experience will be of around the 11 to 12.5 kk raw. The range of experience can be quite all over the place since soul cores, praise, and personal skills can affect it greatly. For the next lap, the level recommended might be low. It's hard to say since both my mages are much higher than that, but I feel like it's still doable by making a few changes if needed. With that, let's break down the best way of hunting Rootthings in my opinion. The first pull on the first lap, we will do one on the same spot to the south. Just a quick simple one to get it out of the way and pop the boost. The actual pull is slightly to the northwest, which I will leave for last. The next pull after that is to the southwest. EK stand by the middle, closer to the south side. RP sprints ahead to lure from the southwest corner. NMS will lure 3 to 5 creatures from the right side. This pull is the hardest on the ED, as we will be left on our own for a bit, with lots of creatures on the room, so if it feels too hard, skip the lure on the MS, and have him help with damaging the creatures here. Next up, RP will split off from the party and go through the south side, luring the creatures on the way. But be mindful that he has plenty of block trackers, so he often struggles on that pull, to the point the ED tends to heal him as he gets into the screen. For this one, EK and ED start the pull here. ED brings the ones closer to the entrance and the MS lures the ones behind that. Coming up, go northeast. For this one, the RP will sprint ahead all the way to the northeast of the floor, luring the creatures on that room back to the spot. Meanwhile, EK and ED lure creatures slowly on the way. I will make small stops to do my spells on the way, replacing the Exori with GFPs instead. That's more impactful than doing full GFPs, but either way, make sure to be damaging creatures on the way. During this, the EMS is slightly behind and ends up luring whatever creatures falls behind the EK. Once at the spot, sometimes the RP will come by the time the pool is dead, and in those moments he will skip and go to the next. But if the pool is healthy, then RP stays and does damage before moving. And once the creatures are getting low, that's where he sprints to do his next lure, which is on the path to the left, southwest of the next pool, going all the way into the room and then coming back with all the creatures. Meanwhile, the rest of the party does the pull on the big room, EK going in first with MS and ED, slowly behind luring the remnants of the previous pull. Next up is to the northwest. For this one, we had the ED sprint ahead of everyone to do a quick lure from the far left. Meanwhile, I will be slightly behind, luring a few creatures on the way to the spot. For this, I found it best to pace myself with my lure, rather than setting it up right away, as that will give time for the MS to get on my screen and UH, but also give some time for the ED to come back. During this, the RP is luring the creatures left on the way behind. This is one of the hardest pulls because it has the least amount of space to move, and with all the lure it gets pretty dense, so if it feels too hard, skip the lure on the druid to the left. Next up, ED and EK will go down through the left path, luring everything slowly while also attacking. For this one, it helps a lot to slow down for the EK spells, as that will get the creatures half HP before reaching the spot. Meanwhile, the RP and MS will be coming from the right path, also damaging the creatures on the way, and by the time both pulls connect, they should be low enough for UE combos. If the creatures are healthy, then this pull can also get difficult because of the lack of space to move around. With this, the lap is completed, and hunting like this, our raw experience before the second nerfs will be of 14 to 16.5kk on average, and now I estimate it to be between 13 to 15.5, with between 900 to 1kk profit per person. The range can vary heavily depending on the level of the mages especially, but also damage praise on the EMS will boost it. Our peak experience on the spawn was to 17.4kk raw, but with the last set of nerfs, I believe it will go down to around 16kk peak XP for us. Regardless, this lap is what works best for us. And that's all I got for this video. If you want more options to hunt, check out this playlist. Thank you for watching, and a special thanks to the supporters of the channel, the Guild Causality, Night Star, and Tuna Hero.